All right, so let's start off. We got our brackets. I love the brackets. All right, so let's start off in the East, okay? Where UConn, of course, the number 1 overall seed. They're going to play the winner of Florida Atlantic and Northwestern. The other part of that bracket is San Diego State, the 5 seed, and Auburn, the 4 seed. So let's look at that grouping right now. And do you see any of those teams that you like in that spot?
I don't know that. Are you asking me about upsets?
Potential.
I mean, obviously UConn's going to take care of Stetson, and a lot of people like Yale. Like they think that that's kind of a team that could be hard to play against, but I just don't see them being able to deal with the athletes Auburn has. I don't know that I see any upsets there unless you consider 9-8, because I think Northwestern is a good shot to beat Florida Atlantic. And I think Florida Atlantic has one of the best coaches in the country, Dusty May.
And they were hot.
Yep.
And then they got into Chris Temple.
I know they did. And look, if you go and look at the way some of these conference tournaments played out and try to make a determination, like if that's going to change your mind, I think that's a mistake. If you look at a game in some of these conference tournaments, because that happened all over the country. Weird results happened in the first, second rounds, even some of the championship games in these conference tournaments. You got to look at the totality of the season.
Get smashed.
I know that.
Right?
They got blown out by 28. Right, and this is. I give them all the credit in the world, Houston, by the way, because they changed conferences.
Yeah.
They go from the American Conference, where they were dominant, and they were number 1 in the country at some point last year. They leave first year of the Big 12, and you go win the Big 12.
I know.
Regular season. I mean, that's incredible.
And that's a gauntlet, right? We talk about Iowa State's a 2 seed. You got them Baylor and Texas, and it's one after another that you got to play every week.
But Northwestern, Florida Atlantic is I think that's a pick'em game. I like Northwestern. But Florida Atlantic has got such a great coach, and he's probably going to be out, by the way, when this tournament runs over.
Yeah,
his name's he was last year too, and he turned down a couple of looks, and I think you can only do that so many times. I think this year Dusty May throws his name into the ring, and he ends up somewhere else, maybe Michigan, maybe Louisville.
So if you forecast down the line, you don't see Auburn, because I can't see that matchup. If I look at Auburn, Connecticut, I still see Connecticut beating Auburn. I don't think they're a fun team to watch, but UConn I think is just too buttoned up.
I don't think it gets really dicey for UConn necessarily until you would get down to Iowa State.
Yeah.
Potentially, assuming Iowa State's still alive. That 10-7 Drake-Washington State's a first-round game in the East. That
I like
a
Drake
lot of people like Drake. Yeah, a lot of people like Drake in that game.
I do too. Yeah, I like them. Illinois, I'm not sure about with them. Now they got an easy run because you get Moorhead and you'll have Drake, and I think you'll move forward. Or actually, you'll have BYU, and I think they'll beat BYU. So I think I could see them getting out of the weekend. But I'm not in love with Illinois.
No, I'm not in love with Illinois either. I think in general, I think that the Big Ten was kind of jumbled this year.
Yeah.
Right? It was kind of a strange season for the Big Ten to predict how that was going to go, with the exception of Purdue, who just looks different than everybody else because they got that behemoth.
Yeah.
Zach Edey.
Yeah.
But look, they've got a tough tournament track record. So people are wondering, like, is it going to happen to them again? Because you talk about a team.
That's the first thing you're saying is that Purdue's going to be out early.
You start, talking about teams that could experience what I just described. When you've already had
another one.
failures in the past in the tournament, it'll seep in quicker to a team like that than other teams because of their track record. And Purdue, some people think, could be vulnerable because of that.
All right, let's look at it. So let's just real quick look at the bottom half of that East and Iowa State. Iowa State can muck it up. What I like Iowa State is that they're rugged, they play good defense, and they'll muck it up.
They will defend all day long. And I think, look, they got to be coming in a high right now. Like, they got to feel pretty good about the way things ended for them, right? Yeah. When you play that well and you play almost perfect basketball in that last game coming into the tournament, and that's why I think, watch out for NC State potentially to get an upset, because when you go through that for 3 or 4 days, and that's how you culminate your regular season, it can carry into the NCAAs for a team like that.
All right, so if we say the East, and we'll come back to it, but we kind of look at a collision course, UConn, Iowa State.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
All right, let's go to the bottom half, and let's go out to the West region. Okay, the West region. Carolina, the 1 seed up top. And this is interesting because this Carolina team, I'm curious to see what you think of. A lot of people think they're the 5th highest, they have the 5th best odds to win the whole thing. What's your opinion of this version of the Carolina?
Yeah, look, they got a lot of talent, and it kind of came together a little bit later for them, I think, for Carolina. So they're a dangerous team, and I think part of it is because there's so much uncertainty about some of these other teams more than anything else. Like, I like Carolina. Do I love them as much as UConn and Houston? I do not.
No.
So I think, look, Carolina, a lot of people are not picking them to make it all the way to the Final Four as a 1 seed.
I think, it's interesting because I look at potentially you could beat them. Now, Michigan State is not good. This is not a good Michigan State version. So I like Mississippi State, actually, in that game. St. Mary's is an interesting team.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they could play defense as well. They'll bang the 3. They're a senior-laden team, and they'll play defense on you.
I think they're actually going to have a pretty decent game against Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Which sometimes playing a tight game in the first round is not the worst thing if you can escape that. I agree with you about St. Mary's. And this team, I don't know, they look a little bit different to me this year. Like that could be potentially a pitfall for Carolina if that ended up being that matchup.
I agree, and I think they could beat Alabama. I'm a little off on Alabama, who's the 4 seed. You look at the bottom, you got Arizona's the 2 seed, and then Baylor is the 3 seed. That's the bottom of the West bracket. What do you think about Arizona?
I like Arizona's chances to get to the Elite 8. And, is that going to be Carolina sitting there, or is that going to be somebody else that knocks them off? I think Arizona has a really good team, pretty well-balanced team.
How about Baylor? Another Big 12. We talk about Baylor, and another team that dependable, play a tough schedule. They're tough down the stretch. They'll bang 3s on you. They play defense.
Played Iowa State fairly tough. When you look at what Iowa State did to Houston, that's was pretty impressive. They played them well. They took Houston to overtime 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
this is they're legit. They've got size, they've got athleticism, they got shooting. So I think Baylor's a team that could be kind of dangerous. So
all right. So to recap, you see an upset in the West region, right? Like because we don't see chalk. I don't see Carolina coming through.
That's the one. That when I did my bracket, that's the one number 1 seed that I didn't have going to the Final Four, because I think the other 3 have a great chance. I'm going to stick with Purdue because I'm not sure who else you're going to take out of it. Is it Tennessee or Creighton? Probably one of those 2 teams. If you're looking at the Purdue bracket and thinking that they're not going to make it through, could be dead wrong, because again they could feel the pressure of all that. And if somebody defends Edie well, maybe they go down. But I picked Purdue, Houston, UConn, all 3 teams to make it to the Final Four.
You know what's interesting is that when you look at Purdue, let's look at that Midwest and Purdue there, because when you look at that region, they got a really good draw. Because if you think about it,
they did.
You got a layup in your first round, and then you got TCU. I think TCU beats Utah State, and I don't think TCU could beat Purdue. And then if you go further down, I think Kansas as the 4 seed is not good. Don't get fooled on this Kansas team. This Kansas team is not very good.
I've seen a couple people out there that are, have pretty big reputations picking Samford in that first game.
I can see it.
And Kansas got guys out too. They've got some big losses. They're not going to have full strength for that game. I don't know if I'd go that far, but they might throw a scare into them.
It's interesting because on the Bet Parks app, they're only 7.5 against Samford. So people think
that tells
Kansas,
you a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, that says a lot.
I mean, look, we're here.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
They do.
These guys are experts. They know what they're doing.
Exactly.
Think about that. Kansas and Samford, and you got a 7.5 point line. That tells you a lot.
They could beat them.
That could be one of those games that's like 32-30 at halftime, and then Kansas starts feeling that.
Yeah, exactly. And if not, you got Gonzaga and McNeese State. This isn't a great Gonzaga team. They're good.
Right.
It's
not like some of the ones they've had in the past.
Nah. Look, I think they can beat Kansas, but I think Purdue goes all the way to that final, to that regional final.
I like Creighton too. So if at some point you could get Creighton and Tennessee matched up, right? One of those 2 teams most likely, if Purdue is able to escape it, it's going to be one of those 2 teams most likely that's going to take them on to go to the Final Four.
So let me ask you about Tennessee, because they have such a great player, and it's really a one-man team, like in a lot of ways. is that a disadvantage? How much of a disadvantage, I should say, is it to have that you're relying on one guy like that? Because like if he has one bad game, you're done.
That's true, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for going out onto the court and you feeling as a team like you have the best player in the game, right? And the way that he played in the year that he had, they're going to feel like that every game. That's what they're going to feel like they're walking out of running out of that tunnel with. That gives you a tremendous amount of confidence. Now, and I've been in this boat before, even as an NBA player, when your star players are struggling, it does definitely kind of permeate the rest of the roster, right? You feel it because now you're like, man, if he's struggling right now, guys have to step out of their lane.
I was watching the SEC tournament, and that's really what happened.
Yep. Oh no doubt.
Look,
he's a hell of a player though, and so I don't necessarily think you're going to see him run into something that he's not going to be able to handle. He's really impressive.
So tell me about him. What do you think? Because he can do everything. He can shoot.
He's tough.
The way
strong.
he slashes.
He finishes with strength through people. He can shoot the basketball. He can shoot the basketball off the dribble. I think the number one quality Connect has is he's relentless. He's relentless, and that's what I think people are now starting to be drawn to him for because he just never stops coming at you.
Now, when you watch Tennessee and you watch Connect play, you see him. He just never stops. He's just always. You can't take your eyes off him.
Yeah.
Which is fun.
Right.
And
it was interesting to see because, it really kind of kicked in, mid-season.
Yeah.
Right? That's when all of a sudden you're, watching him every night.
Yeah.
You're watching highlights. You're catching highlights at the end of the night. You're like, wow, because they're talking about him every single game that they're playing, and now all of a sudden his name takes on a larger-than-life feel to it.
And keeping it 100% real, and everybody in basketball circles will talk about it, a domestic white player, right, that has that kind of skill and that kind of success is going to garner a lot of attention.
Hey, wait till Cooper Flagg hits the scene at Duke, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about he might be the best, American-born white prospect since Bird, potentially, Cooper Flagg. So he's got a lot of the same qualities. And you know what Connect has and Cooper Flagg also has, who's going to Duke? He'll be a one-and-done, or he'll probably be the number one pick in the draft.
Yeah.
They've got a nastiness to them that you have to have. They got an edge to them, like a meanness almost. They respond to the challenge. The more you talk to them, the worse it's going to get for you because they respond to that kind of thing. And Connect has kind of got some of that in him, man. He's a gamer.
Yeah.
He's a gamer. He's a tough kid. So I don't to your point. Look, if he has an off night, they're in trouble.
Yeah,
for sure. But I also think his game is so versatile. What are the odds that he has an off night?
Yeah.
Because he's going to find other ways to put the ball in the basket.
Well, it'll be interesting if it turns out to be Tennessee and Purdue because you got, two teams with two, one-headed monsters. And that's kind of what they are. They're both one-headed monsters. But before we go to the other region, in South region in Dallas, I got to bring something up because you said something that is so on point. When you talk about Connect or talk about Cooper Flagg, and it's the mentality.
Yeah.
Like the mentality, and we were talking about kids, right? So Legs is my go-to when we talk about youth basketball. And we were talking about the difference between a suburban ball player and a city kid, a real tough, city kid that's tested, the whole thing. And you need that to get to another level in that sport. You've got to be a killer. Yeah,
and especially the road you have to take in AAU because you have to be in the AAU tracks, right? You have to be in that. And there's some pros and cons. I know a lot of people beat up AAU basketball, and there's definitely some cons to it. There's also some great opportunities there, particularly if it's a well-run program and they're getting good coaching. The exposure, there's nothing you can do to replicate the exposure that you're going to get. You can change your life over a period of one weekend or a period of one AAU season. You can change your life as a player. So I love the opportunity that guys get. But what you have to go through when you're talking about a sport that's supposed to be a team sport, and now you are put into situations that are basically showcase events, right? Individually, you're trying to grab one of those scholarships. You're trying to get one of those schools to offer you, right? And so now you're trying to get 10 kids to play together because the product's better and ultimately they'll all benefit.
Right.
But at the same time, you know what's in their head when they're playing.
I got to shine.
So if you don't have some of that in you, right, that you got to go grab your piece too, you're going to get swallowed up. There's no doubt about it. You have to be mentally tough and understand what you're going to have to do and how relentless you're going to have to be. And look, I was kind of cut out that way, so it worked for me. Doesn't work for everybody.
Well, and the piece of it is too, like you're going up against older kids.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like you had a great story about, playing a kid with a tattoo on his calf.
Yeah, 12. 12 years old.
Like
so more than one goatee at 12 years old too.
Exactly.
Like, it's really.
Yeah.
It's a funny story. I was coaching in a tournament, and my assistant coach, actually, we're sitting there looking at this kid. These are 12-year-olds, and I mean this kid's full goatee, and we're just like, and my assistant coach had a goatee. And so somebody's shooting free throws, and this kid is like wandering over by our bench, and my assistant coach goes, "Hey, my man," and he looks over and he goes, "How do you keep that so tight, man? I'm just going to give you some tips on like how to, and they're having this conversation during the game. And so the game ends, and we lose. And, like, this kid's dominant. He's bigger and stronger and tough. It's a big difference. I think he was probably 15, right? And maybe just was also maturing faster, even for a 15-year-old. But literally, he was probably like 15 years old. Because the game ends, and now I'm talking to my team in the lobby of the gym, like in the front of the gym. And I look up, and there's like a game getting ready to start on another court with older kids, and he's in layup lines with that team.
No.
Yeah. So I'm like,
no.
So it kind of validated what we thought. But yeah, so listen, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, and but now it's a different world, man. Everybody's reclassifying, and kids are getting held back, or they're prepping a year, or whatever. So. It's not always apples to apples when you're looking at two kids playing against each other at that level.
And we're on a tangent. I want to get back to the South region in a moment, but it's so interesting that the world and the world of reclassification, like I saw it from the football standpoint, we played a team because my kids my kids in 8th grade, right? So they played a team. I mean, these kids were like 16 and 17 years old. And like when you're playing against football players that are 16, 17 years old. I mean, it's
dangerous.
It is.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like kids, they couldn't block, right? Quarterbacks getting thrown up. And there's a rule that if you're up by 28 or more, that you can only run the ball, right? Yeah. So they missed the extra. So there's 2 minutes to go to the first half. They missed the extra point on purpose to go 27.
But
then they get the ball back and go down the field, score to make it 34-0. But my point to you is, whether it's basketball or football, at some point it levels out.
It does.
So
but
what is your aim? I mean, I get
you got a lot of adversity to face getting there, a lot of doors to kick down before it finally does. You feel like everybody's on an equal plane. But that's years down the road, man. You got to navigate those early years, and it starts younger than ever. And that's the hard thing about it too, is because you're asking more kids to specialize in a sport at a younger age if they want to be in that track, right?
Yeah.
And that's difficult, because I coach kids in AAU basketball, and by the time we got to be 14 through 17, the big years, we were on the Under Armour circuit. We're playing a national tournament schedule. The kids, they might have been great baseball players. We'll never know.
Right.
Because that's baseball season.
Yeah.
It's March to July.
Yeah.
Right? Spring and early summer.
Yeah.
That's baseball. I had kids that I coached over the years, early days, that were probably going to be really good basketball players, but they loved baseball, and they dropped off the team because it was baseball season. And I didn't have to do that. And guys my age didn't have to do that. You just played your sport, your season. And then if you had one you loved, you found a way to play that year-round. But it never interfered with you playing your other sports, baseball, football, whatever you wanted to play. It's not necessarily the case now.
I know.
Unless you're a freak. If you're a freak, you can do it. But that's the 1/10 of 1,000,000%. Right?
Exactly.
That's that rare kid, because the coaches are going to let him do that. Like, oh, you didn't play fall ball? Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're that good, we need you.
There's that pressure. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, you got to play fall ball. You got to. I'm like, well, what if the kid wants to play football? And like, it's a better thing. But let me get back to it. Let's get back to the tournament. So let's get to the South region. All right, this is Houston. So if you look up top, you got Houston. I'll tell you a team that I like that got hosed. They got a bad draw and it's Nebraska. I like that Nebraska team.
Yeah.
They run, they're deep, they move the basketball, and the shame is you got to go face Houston in the second round. In the second round.
Yeah, look, and I even think the Texas A&M game is not going to be an easy game for them either. By the way,
but I think they win that game. I like them.
They are 3.5-point favorites in that game, so that tells you right there that's expected to come down to that's going to be a one-possession game with 2 minutes to go. So that's really could go either way. But you're right, the reward you get for that and having a good year and like getting people's attention is you get Houston in the next round.
I know, and they played like I enjoyed them because they played a game fun. That's a fun team. You know, you got an NBA coach.
And he took some hits early on, man. When he first went back there, he took some hits, but he stayed the course. At one point, it looked like maybe his job security wasn't great.
I know.
But he turned it around, and they finally had the kind of year that they were expected to have when he came in there.
Yeah. So you got Nebraska, and then with Tennessee, you're going to have in the bottom part of that upper region, you got Wisconsin and Duke. So Duke plays Vermont.
Yeah.
So we always talk about the Blue Bloods, and Duke is always one of the first ones. Do you like this Duke team? Can this Duke team put things together? We saw Carolina own them. Can Duke put it together and make a run and maybe upset a Houston?
Yeah, that what happened with the Carolina game was really interesting, man. Right? Because that was to me the kind of game that tells you a lot about a team. So I'm not in love with this Duke team as much as I thought I would when I looked at their recruiting class and who they had.
Yeah.
They haven't had that kind of year. Now, but it's still Duke, man. And these the kids that you have in there, they're capable at any given night of putting that together. So you're going to be shocked if Duke goes on a run. They beat Vermont, then they beat Wisconsin. Now here you go. You're playing Houston potentially in a Sweet 16 game. No one's going to be surprised by that.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because Wisconsin, they had a nice run in the Big Ten tournament. There were another team. I sometimes I watch them. And I don't know how they win, but they win.
Yeah, they do. They always find a way. They got 13 losses, man. You know what I mean? But they're in I feel like they're in every game. Like every game for them, it feels tight. And they're playing a team, by the way.
And
James
this is not
Madison,
like your Bo Ryan, Wisconsin.
No, not the same thing. James Madison, by the way, is 31-3. Like if you're not, if you lost track. Now, if you look at their schedule, pretty light, right? But they're 31-3. They're used to winning games. I'm not saying they're going to beat Wisconsin, but I'm really curious to see how a team that's 31-3, fares against a team like that's in one of these power conferences like Wisconsin. And can they give them a battle because they're so used to winning games? That's all they know.
Yeah,
we'll find out.
I think the South region is the best region. It's the toughest region.
Yeah,
because you look at the bottom half of it. Marquette is very, very good. And Kentucky is another team, man. Kentucky puts it all together.
Yep.
They look unstoppable at times.
And also, NC State, Texas Tech is going to be a really interesting game.
Yeah.
And NC State's got to be feeling great about themselves right now. Like that was an improbable run. But you got momentum and you've got confidence on your side going into that. And then you got Marquette down there at the bottom of that bracket.
And Marquette's good. And listen, I don't not in love with Florida. So I like Marquette. Marquette could actually, Marquette, Kentucky is a great game. That could be a really interesting game.
Florida's going to actually get, Boise State or Colorado, right? They're going to get the winner of that game tonight. In that first game, I think that's going to be a very interesting game.
You think Colorado can beat?
Yeah,
I like Colorado to win.
I think Colorado can win that game, and I think that might be an interesting game with Florida.
Yeah, I could see Florida losing. I don't think Florida's that good.